Yeah.
All right, let's move forward. So let's go into biggest loss you had to overcome. You talked about the currency in Venezuela collapsing, and then what you learned in that situation and what it felt like at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge loss, right? I mean, imagine you make your career, started in a warehouse, ended up being general manager of the company. Next step was going to be shareholder. So I had that, I was
Climbing the
blindfolded.
corporate ladder, like just honed in, one step at a time, all the way up to the top.
And then the country economy collapses, right? And there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can sit in meetings and start.
Sorry to cut you off, but can you unpack that? I mean, that's not something we can just kind of mow over. You're working a job, you're living in a country where you're from, right? You come from a diverse background, but this is where you chose to like start your career. You're putting in the time, effort, energy, you're doing the thing. And then they said the economy and our currency is essentially defunct. What does that feel like? What is who do you go talk to? Who do you call? Like, what is the thing that's happening in your mind? You're glued to the news.
Yeah, it's just crazy because you see how things started to happen that there's nothing you can do about it, right? And
those are extreme market conditions.
It's a very extreme market condition. It's something that's undescribable, seriously. And then basically what happened is they started putting some price control on stuff, right? And the price they put was below our cost, right? So you basically can't even bring in any more product or produce anything because every time you sell something, you're losing money. But if you don't do it, you go to jail. So those things are pretty extreme. And in those extreme situations, something very awkward happened as well. My wife and I, we got kidnapped because that thing was happening also in the country, right? And that was a very unpleasant experience, if I may say it the least. And basically, all those things combined forced us to come here to the US and say, okay, we have to start all over again, right? And it's hard when you already made a career and you already had a position, when you already were known in a place, and then you have to start from scratch. And I tried to do some stuff and those things didn't work out. And I found myself delivering balloons for my wife, right? Out of desperation, she made a balloon business, making some nice luxury balloon arrangements, but I became the delivery boy, right? So I had to do whatever I had to do in order to put some food on the table. But I believe today it was a blessing, right? I'm also I like the way you put it. I'm a Christian in progress, or how did you put it?
In training,
exactly. I'm in the same position as you. So I believe that was the desert where I needed to go in order to shift and transform myself into the person that I am today, right? And it took a while. It was a long-suffering moment, right? But at the end of the day, when you start, and that's why I make so much emphasis on this, you have to start hanging around with the right type of people. And sometimes those people, you're hanging around with them without even them knowing that you're hanging around with them. And that's through podcasts like this one, through books, through YouTube.
On me, bro? You've been creeping on me?
You know I have.
Hey,
because
I love it so much. Let me ask you a question. I don't know how comfortable you are unpacking the kidnap story. Are you comfortable sharing a brief synopsis about it, or should we skip forward?
Well, it's part of what I lived, and it's a traumatic experience. I'm over it, right? But yeah, I mean, I was picking up my wife, right? We were planning to go to the beach, all right? So I picked her up.
And this is in what city in Venezuela?
That was in Caracas, the capital. So I picked her up at her house, and then 5 guys just came out with guns and pointed the gun on her head and then on mine, and they just put it in the car, and they started driving. And that's something in Venezuela called express kidnapping, right? They just want to take all the money from your bank accounts. And it's a very unpleasant experience when you are.
So what they do is they essentially kidnap you, then they take you to the bank or the ATM, they have you extract all your money, hand it to them, and then they essentially generally let you go?
I would say 80% ends up on them killing you, right? So I was only at 20% that was lucky that they didn't end up killing me.
That's a factual thing. Like, the majority of people get murdered after.
Yeah.
That's terrible, man.
Yeah, it's horrible. So that's a very crazy experience.
I know that happens in some other countries as well. I know that happens in Mexico. I know that happens in countries in Africa. I know that happens in some other countries in Central America and also South America. Yeah, that's a terrible, terrible thing, man. That was rough. So you had probably some stuff to go through emotionally when you were done with that, but the Lord kept his hand on you and you guys were able to make it through. And so looking back on that experience, you kind of just pushed that, hey, that was something that I had to walk through in my life. You ever, hone in on that for inspiration when things are tough today? Hey, I made it through this. I can make it through that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all those things make you tougher, right? At the moment when you're experiencing pain, it's horrible, right? But the reality is at the end, you can come out stronger from those things, right?
And so to segue into, the currency collapsing, you said what it feels like now in hindsight, you said it's a blessing. So I'm just going to tie those in to, what happened to you with that traumatic experience, as well as the other traumatic experience, which is, the economy collapsing around you. You're saying, Hans, in hindsight, you wrote here, it turns out to be a blessing, something you can pull from for strength when you have new adversities.
Yeah, totally.
Love it, man.